Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Dissecting Fiction podcast. I'm Vinny Murphy.
And I'm Christian Cutlick.
And on today's show, we're going to be doing another Dissecting Fiction Goes to Disney. This case, once again, as it usually is, Disney World. And we'll be joining Boy Meets World with their May 10th, 1996 episode, The Happiest Show on Earth. So I think this is the first year we do have Blossom and Full House running together. Here we have a show that airs only a few months after the last visit to Disney World on ABC, which was Roseanne. So this is about 3 months later. And I think there are some things we can pull out that are showing what they were trying to promote at the time that's pretty consistent. But we'll get to that as we move through the story. This episode directed by Jeff McCracken, which is a great name. I'm sure his college friends had fun with that. He's directed 51 episodes of the show. Once again, another situation where we have people who work really consistently on the show. Writer's room. Don't think anyone is getting sole credit on anything here. Writers are Howard Busgang. I think that's how it's pronounced. And Mark Blutman. Mark Blutman actually developed quite a few shows in this era. A lot of people my age and a little younger are fans of a show called Ghost Writer, which was a PBS show featuring a ghost that would inhabit computers and would write stories, and it was all about, education. It was good. We do have quite a few cameos in this episode. Hilary Tuck is Kristen Hoffman, who is one of Cory's love interests. We'll get into that. Debbie Dunning plays Alexandra. Dunning, probably best known as Heidi on Home Improvement. And probably the biggest, I guess, star is, always subjective. But Andrew Keegan as Ronnie Lips Waterman. Andrew Keegan, very popular actor around this time. Always playing kind of the jerk, good-looking guy in the school. I shouldn't say always. There are a couple exceptions to that, but often playing that. You may know him as Joey Donner from 10 Things I Hate About You. There's also another cameo in this one. And I shouldn't say cameo. I should say guest stars for most of them. But we'll save that as we go through. This being an only one episode arc, some of it's a little rough.
I mean, for me, I just don't think I like this kind of style of show. I mean, not like sitcoms, but like this is a very, I guess for all the sitcoms, from what I remember, this is a very more romance-focused one.
Yeah, and I think Boy Meets World kind of generally focuses on Cory and Topanga's relationship. Even going into Girl Meets World later on, there's certainly a focus on that. Boy Meets World it's interesting. It's probably objectively my favorite show of this era. This episode is not. It is not my favorite of the show at all, and it's also not my favorite of any of the Disney ones. I think it's actually, I'd rate it pretty low compared to some of what we've watched. Let's get into the plot a little bit. We could probably talk about what goes on and why this one's a little underwhelming by the end. Basically, this episode opens up with Cory, who is no longer dating Topanga, now dating the aforementioned Kristen, played by Hilary Tuck. Cory doesn't really want to be dating Kristen, but Kristen's like all about him. And I always think it's weird the way they do that with Cory, where like he's a total dork, but then like when they need him to be suave, he comes off as such.
I watched this with a few of my friends who are like, why is everyone just fighting over this like dorky, the most possible, like milquetoast dorky looking dude possible in the school?
Yeah, it's because he's a savage. That's what it is.
He doesn't really explain that. They don't show that very well here, though, because like all he does is do the one cheesy pickup line, where he says, "I don't have any pickup lines because I'm lost in your beautiful blue eyes." I think like the first 5 minutes was probably the stronger part of this episode, but
yeah,
we'll get into the rest of it.
And this is keeping in mind that 5 minutes is like a fourth of the show. So, yeah, we get past this. We learn that, Cory doesn't really want to be dating Kristen. He wants to be back with Topanga. We're going to cut a lot of fat with the explanations here. The next day in class, there's a contest to go to Disney World because, of course, there has to be something. Won by Topanga, and one Ronnie Lips Waterman. Shawn reminds Cory that Ronnie Waterman's nickname is Lips, and he has to stop Ronnie from trying to kiss Topanga. So this incites Shawn and Cory to go to Disney World because they could just do that as like sophomores in high school.
Yeah, and I think he says he wipes out his savings account, whatever that means, for like a 16-year-old. Like, I guess he was using that to buy cigarettes or something.
For all of their plotting, I can't imagine they have any money left if you go through all the episodes of all the things that they try to pull off here. Thankfully, Cory's brother, Eric, is going to help him out by faking that Cory is there and creating a Cory dummy. That might be the best thing in the entire show. And so Eric brings around this dummy to the school, like, confusing teachers and classmates alike.
Yeah, that was a funny scene where the principal got very confused about him stuffing his brother into the locker and just being kind of bewildered for like a minute or so before just giving up and just going back to his office.
Eric, portrayed by Will Friedle, pretty constant presence in voice acting at this point, maybe best known as the lead of Terry McGinnis in Batman Beyond.
Oh, I did not know that. That's a fun little fact there.
That's him. So we have the situation where now Shawn is going to go, Shawn and Cory, Shawn kind of pushing things along and getting their uncle to transport them to Walt Disney World. Boy Meets World taking place in Philadelphia, which is a change. It seems like it's always Chicago. It is Philadelphia in this case. But shot typically in LA. I wasn't sure if this was an East Coast or West Coast production. It was a West Coast production. And so them going to Disney World was a pretty big trip for the crew. We also find out that Kristen is going to end up in Disney World as well, because that all makes sense, right? Everyone ends up there. And, of course, she thinks that Cory is there for her. And he is there for Topanga as the devious Lips Waterman moves in.
Yeah, that's the whole crux of this episode. I'm assuming many episodes is Topanga's kind of relationship with everybody in this. I guess she feels like more like a main character than anybody else in this, because I feel like a lot of the plot focuses on her. Most of this is focused on how she doesn't want to be with him, but she does want to be with him, but she thinks he's like kind of this playboy Hugh Hefner type, which again is this dorky little guy. They think he's like kind of this Hugh Hefner swag machine.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. They always were really goofy on Boy Meets World, which is why it usually works. In this case, with such limited plot, and like this almost might have been better if it was 2 episodes, because it could have gotten wackier.
Yeah, it feels very down to earth. Like I think the weirdest part was about the dolphins. Like,
oh yeah, we haven't gotten to that yet. So
okay, well, all right, we'll get into that.
So look, this is going to be a little out of order, folks. It's 20 minutes long. There are a couple of different sequences, but one of the things that you do learn is, because this is a school trip, they're learning about the dolphins who reside in the Sea Pavilion in Epcot. This is actually where Debbie Dunning comes in. She is the trainer for the dolphins, teaching these students about the dolphins. That becomes a little bit of a weird thing through it. There's also a sequence where Cory is trying to interrupt Lips Waterman and Topanga and keeps popping up in all different guises. That's kind of becoming a recurring theme through these. But eventually, you know, they end up, as you were saying, part of this, she doesn't want to be with Cory, but it's like this constant uncertainty. And Cory, going into the Dolphin Pavilion, which I'm still confused why he can go there because he's not actually part of the school trip, runs into someone very special, which is Stacey Keenan portraying Dana from Step by Step.
But I thought it was a cute reference. I kind of watched these two back and back. Right.
It's, you know, it's important because that is the next one to come up. I don't want to get into my love for it too much right now, but Step by Step, I told you my favorite was in this year, and we've gotten through 2 that weren't my favorite, so you can probably figure it out. This was really typical of like the TGIF cameos where like they would be like really small scenes that would just sort of establish that everyone was in the same universe. I don't even want to say universe. I wanted to say world. I'm going to say world because we can go back to saying that. But so she gives him some sage like advice, and then he and Topanga get back together. I mean, that's basically the entire episode, right? Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. There was a big like subplot about the dolphins, though. A lot of that hinged around the sea pavilion. There was a very funny scene where they're arguing outside the sea pavilion, and you just hear these calming ocean waves crashing against the rocks like every 5 seconds as they're like yelling at each other, which I thought was funny. And the odd relationship with the dolphins in that one of the dolphins lost their mate, and I guess it wants to kill itself or die of sadness like Padme did.
That's Disney now.
Wasn't then, but it is now. It's a crossover universe.
Anastasia, Disney movie. Yeah, and that's really like the meat of everything. Pretty limited in the areas they visit during the episode. I think the biggest thing here is while Roseanne really covered the World Showcase in Epcot, this is very much focusing on Future World. I think that has to be intentional. It's clear that they wanted to promote Epcot at this time, and this is really taking the other side of it and showing a lot of good footage of it. It's just a little bit harder to watch. I think it's not all that funny most of the time. There is a pretty funny gag at the end of the episode where Cory comes back and his family is trying to address how he just disappeared. His little sister Morgan, who does not appear frequently, also curses, which is pretty great. I just think this whole kind of plot, yes, you have that like romantic element that they really like in these. I just can't really pull too much out of it. Like thinking of something that I have a fond memory of seeing on television, which is not true for almost all the other ones. I can kind of go like, oh yeah, that part was cool. This one, even at the time, like I remember watching it and feeling like they didn't really go to Disney World too much. They were too obsessed with the dolphins and talking about like their relationships.
That was kind of my problem with it too. I think they shot the exteriors in Epcot really well because a lot of them are night shots. So you got to see, Spaceship Earth all lit up very nicely, which is always a very nice thing to see at Epcot. And I think seeing the Sea Pavilion exterior was kind of neat, if not a bit annoying to shoot in front of because it does make sounds constantly. That's mainly what I pulled out of this. I really like how they shot most of it at night, but they did not show many of the exhibits there. Like, even though they're at the Sea Pavilion, they're backstage in the Sea Pavilion. Like, most of the time, you never see what's actually going on, like whether the show's there, what can you actually do and see there. And even beyond that, like they don't go to the back, which I guess Roseanne did mostly, but they did a very poor job of like showing off most of Epcot. Like even when they somehow stay the night in Disney World and they sleep in Splash Mountain, which is, I'm sure, very weird. Like you have to cross 2 parks to get there, but like you couldn't find a place to sleep in Epcot. Like that place is huge.
Yeah, pet peeve there too. I bring this up every time it comes up, the not acknowledging how far away the parks are from each other. The next one we cover does a much better job of doing that. One of the big reasons it's one of my favorites amongst quite a few other reasons. This one, I think, not that great in that respect. I think the biggest pro on this episode is the cast. A lot of really good, at that time, young actors. Ben Savage kind of always plays Ben Savage. But everyone else is really good. Andrew Keegan was great through that entire era. Someone I always like to see pop up, even to this day. So I think they saved a little bit, but it's not a terribly dissimilar problem to the problem that Family Matters had. They just don't seem as exaggerated because it's only 20 minutes.
Yeah, at least with Family Matters, I think there's a couple different other plot lines going on, and like Family Matters is so wacky that you could still pull a lot out of it. And I think the central part was a bit stronger with Urkel doing the science fair. And I think the science fair fit in better with Epcot's whole the future thing, rather than just the dolphins, which doesn't seem very futuristic, or like nature conservation, which Animal Kingdom would kind of take over much later in the Disney, I guess, theme park ethos. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think neither are really wacky enough. But this is a big disappointment considering how goofy this show can be and how like just weird funny it is in other places. Like this is like the perfect opportunity for them to do something really like bizarre and they don't take it.
Well, one thing I noticed was missing is that there wasn't a whole lot of mascots characters. Usually we have at least one of the mascots, usually Goofy or Chippendale, show up and start hitting on all of the girls. And somehow in this very like relationship focused, like jealousy based plot, that doesn't happen at all. Like I would have liked to see a joke where Topanga, walks off with Goofy or jokes with Donald or something. Like that would have been fun. I thought it was very odd that they didn't have any mascots here, which, usually that's a big focus of the parks. I guess they didn't want to, since this is a bit more of like, I don't know, a tween or a teen show, and teens usually think mascots are lame.
Maybe that's part of it, but I mean, let's see. I would have been about 10 when this came out, which is probably like pretty close to their primary market. I was bored by it because there was nothing like that, and you got used to it in the other ones. It's not like they weren't there in all of the other, even Roseanne. Like, which, I'm shocked how much I really like that, rewatching it. But yeah, it's not the worst thing. I think maybe it feels a little less offensive than some of the Family Matters boredom because it's less time spent, but not very good. Definitely compared to the 2 Roseanne episodes too.
Yeah, I think in this one, Disney felt more like a background than anything else. Like, people just were not interacting with the theme parks enough to really warrant this being a Disney episode.
Right, I would agree with that, but next time that changes to such an incredible degree that I'm so excited about our next one, so you guys better listen. But I think that pretty much brings us to the end of this one. Boy Meets World, once again, one of my favorite shows, not really one of my favorite episodes. If you guys want to check out some of our older ones, if you haven't heard it, we're doing this whole series of Dissecting Fiction Goes to Disney. We're trying to hit all of the major sitcom appearances really since the 90s, and then we may take a break in the middle before we get back to sitcoms once we get out of the 90s, or we may go straight through. We're not quite sure. Let us know what you think. If we take that break, we're going to be taking that break with some other content driven by the Disney parks. We don't really want to reveal what that is yet, but if you feel like you want that little buffer in between, let us know. Or if you want us to just keep going through all the sitcoms, we'll do that too. You can check out all of our shows. We are on almost every major podcast platform. We're on YouTube. If you want to find us on social media to keep up to date, we are all over the place on that too. Just type in Dissecting Fiction with your favorite platform. If you're looking for some toys or some statues or something cool, check out toystoreguide.com. They'll hook you up with some great local businesses that could really use your support right now, and support all your local businesses. Christian, you got anything else this week?
Yeah, we recorded this on the week of many, many announcements. February turned out to be kind of a content drought, but an announcement flood. So I'm going to recommend something that's kind of nebulously in the pipeline. It's come up a couple of times here and there. I'm going to recommend people check out Monstrous. It is a comic book in the vein of Avatar: The Last Airbender or The Legend of Korra. It's written by Major Lee Liu and drawn by Sana Takada. Those are 2 Japanese creators of Major Lee Liu you probably heard on several mainstream books. But it is a story about a girl with a demon body thingy, and she goes across kind of like a 1920s Chinese-themed continent. Again, kind of like Legend of Korra, think in that same aesthetic vein. And it's a cool story. It's lots of magic, technology. It's a cool fantasy story that's supposedly being developed right now by HBO.
Yeah, and a lot of those early issues are starting to get pricey, so check it out now while you still can, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Like we said, we'll be back with more Dissecting Fiction Goes to Disney in the future, usually about every other week. And we have tons of other content coming up, but for now, we'll sign off. I'm Vinny Murphy.
And I'm Christian Kutlick.
And thanks for listening.